We are really delighted to welcome you all for our 42nd session in our webinar series, which commenced exactly a year ago. So it was in the month of May 2020, complete year now. We have been organizing these webinars, and we are truly grateful to you for encouraging us at the Association of Asia Scholars, joining us for these, and that is why the momentum has continued, and we have been able to bring together very eminent scholars from all over the world, and also organized two major international conferences, the manuscripts of both which have been prepared. The second one is still work in progress. We hope to submit the manuscript to an international publisher by next month. The Association of Asia Scholars, now most of you are familiar with, we came into existence in the year 2005. Ever since, we have been organizing several workshops, conferences, and in India and abroad, and brought out over a dozen volumes, books with renowned publishers as a result of those interactions. We've also completed 11 years of our journal, our flagship publication, Millennial Asia, which is now 3 issues a year, being published by Sage Publishers. And we have already announced the call for papers for a special issue on the agrarian crisis, which has, as you know, enveloped India as well as other countries facing similar issues of food security. So we do have a special issue coming out also every year. So with this brief introduction about our Association of Asia Scholars, we welcome you all to this session again, and I'm sure it's going to be a very engaging one with Professor Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, whom I had the pleasure of interacting with 2 years ago. That was a wonderful experience around the same time to be in Colombo. And thank you so much for joining us today. I can see Professor Satoru is also with us. He was a speaker in just a webinar that was organized by us, again very successful. So thank you once again, and for the formal introduction of our speaker for today and the theme of today's webinar, I'll request Professor Swaran Singh to kindly take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Reena Marwa. And, it's always a pleasure to have this great combination of great speaker also being your great friend. So this is one of those beautiful occasions. I also, like my colleague Reena Marwa, would like to acknowledge presence of Dr. Sotaru Nagao with us. Both Asanga and Nagao Sensei are very close friends. And I am lucky that despite my being of older generation, they treat me as a friend as well. So delighted to see two very good friends. Also delighted to see my generation friend, Professor Nirmal Jindal has joined us also. She is right now the principal of Satyavati College of Delhi University, but also a renowned scholar herself on international relations. I'm delighted to see her with us. Let me begin by saying that the Chinese have, among several sayings, one saying that goes like this: traveling 1,000 miles is like reading a book. And I think that is a very interesting way of explaining how our understanding of issues and discourses changes depending on where are we sitting while we are either deliberating or contemplating those issues. And like my colleague Professor Reena Marwa just mentioned, she was also hosted by Asanga, but I was also hosted in 2018 full month of December. by Dr. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera in Institute of National Security Studies in Sri Lanka. He was at that time the Director General. So I had great honor and privilege of seeing his very indulgent hospitality, great friendship, and I think that created a great environment where we could perhaps be quite productive during that time. Among other things, one of the two books on your banner, on my banner right now, which was circulated, came out at that time. So I had the pleasure of reading and reviewing that book, of course. But I have known Asanga even before that. If you know academic community in Sri Lanka, you're absolutely not likely to miss Asanga's presence. So let me briefly mention how it changed my view of life that 1 month of spending time in Sri Lanka. Entirely new perspective. For example, I began to appreciate how one of the greatest 20th century geopolitician, Nicholas Spikeman, and among many other books, one of his famous book called The Geography of the Peace, 1944, talks about how great powers in 20th century had continued to be in a struggle. And he has a rimland theory. And in that he explains how, in that constant struggle among great powers, the focus remained primarily on attaining control of what he called marginal and inner seas, which he calls were adjacent to the rimland. And those interesting, island territories, island states which are bordering that rimland from offshore were the most important trendsetters or game-changing island states, which were on the rimland but offshore of the rimland in these what he calls marginal and inner seas adjacent to the rimland. Now, sitting in Sri Lanka, I realized that other than Great Britain and Japan, Sri Lanka is a state like that. So, from geopoliticians' perspective, if any island state has a potential to spin the trends and tenor and templates of international order, according to Spikeman at least, island states like Sri Lanka have enormous potential. And we all have been discussing how Hambantota lies in middle of what is called expressway of sea lanes of communication. Not for nothing, Chinese have been so preoccupied with building that particular port. So the strategic location of Sri Lanka in that sense revealed itself to me enormously differently, even if I was familiar with some of these geopolitics and geostrategic literature before. But sitting there, the realization was completely different. And then, of course, I had this great opportunity to read Sri Lanka at the Crossroads by Asanga Abeyagoonasekera. So that being my revelation made me really look at India's location, India's engagement of Sri Lanka in a very different fashion. But today, we have a speaker who has done enormous amount of work, convincing the rest of the world, like I got convinced being there, of how the strategic location of Sri Lanka is so significant and how Sri Lanka, in cooperation with other major players of international order, can really contribute to ensuring peace, stability, prosperity, development, and everything else that we all aspire around the world. But the last point which I want to add here is that most of us have perhaps been exposed to Asanga's academic writings and speaking. What is equally significant is to underline, and I would underline that, he looks very young, but he's so much under his belt right now. I am so envious of how much he has achieved in such young age. We know that he was the founding Director General of Institute of National Security Studies of Sri Lanka, where I am, with His Grace, external non-resident senior fellow there, and I had a chance to spend time. But before that, He was also executive director of very famous Lakshman Kadirgamar Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies. Now, before that, if you look at his career, that part to me makes it more interesting and gives a very, very wide spectrum to when he speaks from this wide range of experience. We all remember tsunami happened. We have discussed in our meetings sometimes tsunami, how that has transformed the way we look at life. Soon after tsunami of 2004, in 2005, Asanga was appointed as chairman of Ceylon Fisheries Harbour that was demolished by the tsunami, and Asanga at a young age was appointed as chairman of Ceylon Fisheries Harbour Corporation, and in a matter of 5 years, he turned it around from a loss-making enterprise to a profit-making enterprise. And then he was appointed immediately as chairman of Sri Lanka's Foreign Employment Agency. Then he became member of the board of directors of Sri Lanka's Port Authority. We understand Sri Lanka's ports are enormously sort of engaged by major powers, including India. So he was the member of the board of Sri Lanka's Port Authority. And likewise, enormous contribution, and his career actually begins in telecommunications. I mean, I don't want to go into earlier part of his career where he started in telecommunications as a sector and moved on to very senior positions at a very young age. And of course, he comes from a very, very influential political family. That is not something I want to emphasize. We have stayed completely academic in our interactions on this platform. But after so many senior positions in very, very critical areas, he decided to set everything aside and move into academic career. In fact, it will be surprising that currently, as we are talking, he's pursuing and is about to finish his doctoral degree. So in some ways, he's been moving reverse. At this stage, he's trying to also earn a PhD degree for himself after being a visiting professor at so many universities. So this enormity of experience of both a practitioner in a whole range of sectors, and then now, focusing for about last 10 years in think tank and academic life and discussions and discourses, being enormously productive in publications, and of course, globetrotting and discussing and sort of rubbing shoulders with top-ranking intellectuals and practitioners around the world. So I'm extremely happy that I know him personally, and we take each other as friends. But it's also a delight then to host him today as a speaker at AAS Wednesday webinars, which we hold every first and third Wednesday now. And I'm looking forward to a very, very wide-ranging exposition and expose of what he sees is, in that sense, Sri Lanka's political challenges, political geostrategic position, and how Sri Lanka looks at itself and its engagement with the rest of the world. Briefly, in terms of how it has moved in the past, but also how it is increasingly engaging this very tumultuous and turmoil-ridden geopolitical discourse in the larger region in which Sri Lanka is located at the very center. With that, I think rather extended introduction, because I'm so impressed with his achievements, I ended up talking more than I should have. I would request participants to ensure that their mics remain off so that we are not distracted when the speaker is speaking initially for about 25 minutes or so. And then we'll engage him in question answer for an hour or more. But also request you to keep your videos on if you can, so that the speaker has a sense of who are the people he's speaking to. And I think we also get a sense of the body language as to how people are responding to as he speaks. So with that request to participants, I'll now have the pleasure of inviting Asanga Abeyagoonasekera to make his initial proposition and then make his initial exposition before we go to question and answer session. The floor is yours now, Asanga.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, Professor Swaran Singh, a great friend of Sri Lanka, as well as a distinguished fellow of our Institute of National Security Studies. So it's always a pleasure to be with you in your program, as well as to carefully work with you on many of your research work, as well as Dr. Reena, who I met back in 2011 at ICWA. conference where the first time I met both of you. I think, yes, it has been a long time, and it's always a pleasure. Thank you. And many participants I know, I look at the screen, and Dr. Nagao from Japan, and many others. Thank you so much for joining from different parts of the world. And I mean, it's a difficult time in Sri Lanka, as well as there are several Sri Lankans here also. And thank you for joining. And also in India. I mean, first I would like to remember some of the professors. I mean, people that we loved, as well as Professor Kesavan from ORF, and he passed away. So I want to remember him. He invited me, and I learned a lot from Professor Kesavan. I mean, the thing of Delhi is that you learn so much when you're in Delhi. The people you interact, even the younger scholars like Dr. Joita, who passed away, unfortunately. So, I mean, I want to remember them. So, and I want to switch to my PowerPoint. I have a few slides. Can I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much again. And so today I'll be speaking about Sri Lanka's geopolitical challenges, the past and present. So more about the present. The past, what I'm referring is basically to Rajapaksa 1.0, which is Mahinda Rajapaksa era, starting from 2005 to 2015, where I served the foreign policy think tank and worked very closely. So I understand how that regime functioned. Then after that, President Sirisena's regime, where again I served as the national security think tank. So that's the past that I'm referring to, but not. I mean, I have few slides on that, but the present, I would like to talk much more on that. As you know, this is the book that I released a few weeks ago, and now it's available in India as well as in Sri Lanka. Conundrum of an Island. I thank all of you for taking your time and reviewing my work, and sending some very important, comments, some areas to improve my work. Professor Swaran, thank you very much, as well as Dr. Nagao, who reviewed my book. So thank you. This is a quote that I used analyzing the Quad, what's going on right now, and I use George F. Kennan's containment, and how Kennan saw the containment strategy back then when the Cold War was there, and try to sort of refer what's happening right now. And my previous work, Sri Lanka at Crossroads, was the first basically an academic dive to looking at geopolitical perspective of Sri Lanka, mapping Sri Lanka and seeing the geographical position of Sri Lanka's importance, and how three spheres of influence, India, the closest neighbor, US, and China, influenced Sri Lankan foreign policy. The second work basically goes beyond that, trying to analyze the national security threat of Sri Lanka, and also bring in the BRI and Indo-Pacific into the discussion. So, as Professor Swaran was talking about Spikeman, I refer to Spikeman's work in Crossroads, Sri Lanka at Crossroads, where the map at the bottom of the screen, which is what Mackinder drew, and here's basically a map I inserted to my the last book, the Sri Lanka at Crossroads, how island nations face the great oceans, and how significant impact does the island nations make towards the ocean, as well as the influence. If you look at Great Britain, Mackinder saw the influence towards Atlantic and Japan towards the Pacific. So I mapped Sri Lanka and towards the Indian Ocean, and I try to sort of discover how much of influence in this, looking at the geostrategic position of Sri Lanka, how much of significant influence that Sri Lanka has on the Indian Ocean. So when you look at the earlier ancient maps, Sri Lanka is elongated in a larger size. If you look at the first map of Ptolemy to Henricus Metellus, so the reason being it's been elongated is because of its trade relations, I mean, the rich trade relations. So Sri Lanka was known to the to many parts of the world, especially to the back then even to the Roman Empire. Um, Here is a significant moment where basically in the Second World War, where the Japanese attacked Sri Lanka, and not much have been discussed about it, and where Winston Churchill says that this was a decisive moment. So because if you look at the westward expansion of Japan after taking over Singapore, so Japan basically clearly understood the importance of Sri Lanka. And according to Sir Arthur Bryant, a Japanese naval victory in April 1942 would have given Japan total control of the Indian Ocean. So it's referring to to Sri Lanka. And if you look at Sri Lanka's references right now, is if you look at the strategic neck of water connecting the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea, the Malacca Trap, or the how close it is to the waterways of Malacca. It's rich trade, basically from Hambantota, the close sea lines of communications on one of the world's busiest waterways. And how would it sort of, the investments or this Chinese presence in Sri Lanka, or if you look at it in the other parts of the BRI, are they sort of moving from a defensive measure, or are they sort of looking at transforming to an offensive measure? So, where Parag Khanna, again, one of the scholars that I admire, reviewed most of my work. He said that new Eurasian land bridge, if you look at it, when China announces its aspiration to conduct the Eurasian land bridge, connecting, the Central Asia towards the South Asia, in 2000, a few took notice. But defense can quickly become offense. And I really agree with Parag's thoughts here, because I see many places. I see some of the economic activity moving towards offensive measures, or preparing for from defensive towards offensive, and I'll come to that in a bit. Another area that Sri Lanka and India is closely connected, I refer to this work in my Sri Lanka at Crossroads. I call it the Kaveri Delta influence, and where the rich Dravidian influence has been there from last 2000 to many years from the ancient past. So it has never gone off the radar of basically the Sri Lankans' history is basically speaks is very rich, as well as with the Tamilian influence. So if you look at the northern peninsula, has a significant direct influence of the Kaveri Delta, the Tamilian influence. If you look at the recent elections, the discussions that went on, or the human rights issue, so it is connected. Where central governments, both Colombo and in New Delhi, has a significant challenge in managing this sphere. So that's another area of geopolitical influence. Now, if you look at the past regime of Rajapaksa, the Mahinda Rajapaksa, the present president's brother, he subscribed to the BRI. He was Sri Lanka was one of the first countries in South Asia to tie up with the BRI when it was announced back then. And slowly, you see a significant, gradual, loans being taken, Hambantota to many other ports. And then when President Xi arrived to the island in 2014, a strategic relationship was developed, and many agreements were signed. Moving from economic, there was visits of submarines, Chinese submarines, which upsetted New Delhi. And then there was elections. There was internal resets also done to the Sri Lankan constitution, where he amended the constitution. Then he wanted to stay for a longer time. That changed the whole political internal, basically, stability of the country. And where where he lost the balance of foreign policy. So where I discussed this at the Sri Lanka and Crossroads, my first, the initial attempt. So the strained Indo-Lanka relationship, you could see on the Rajapaksa 1.0, the last years of it. And what you see was, Rajapaksa was defeated, and Rajapaksa blaming India, saying that Indian intelligence, as well as India, was behind the defeat. And where I see his assessment was basically, if you assess the Sirisena, the president, the former president, he also had the same sort of a pattern, where he began with a good relationship with India, and then he ended towards his term by blaming India, even going beyond, saying that he's an assassination coup was there for his life. So you see a kind of a pattern develop. I see how Indian relationship gets strained, but Chinese relationship gets strengthened year by year. And this is a clear example right now in the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime, where it came to power in 2019. Within 2 years, you have a significant, strong relationship with China, and I'll come to that. So this is the present status. You see visits of Chinese Yang Jieqi, the senior ambassador, to Minister of National Defense a few weeks ago, and then Wang Yi he was here, but then again he's going to be here a few weeks from now. He's going to visit Sri Lanka. Now, some of the comments the defense minister said was very interesting. He said that certain major countries are keen to form cliques and factions and seek regional hegemony. And so he said that, give me a second. People share aspirations and severely harmful the interests of the regional countries. So he's referring to, of course, India, and he's referring to the Quad. And so he's basically highlighting that countries like Sri Lanka should be in a neutral position and not lose that neutrality by joining cliques. He also said that we'll make joint efforts with Sri Lanka to strengthen coordination and safeguard regional peace. Now, this is a very interesting comment because it would sort of reflect, I think China would use that in their new projects or the models that they're trying to introduce in the island in the future. So they will say that coordination and safeguarding regional peace is a priority, just like in Djibouti. Now, my fear is that are they going to sort of use the same mechanism that was used in places like Djibouti in Sri Lanka? I'll come to that in another slide. So Sri Lanka's position on issues relating to, now see, they even praise the regime, saying on Taiwan, on Hong Kong, on Xinjiang, on the human rights track. And China, supports the human rights position in Geneva. So when many nations are saying, look, you need to work on the human rights issue, but China says is not bothered of the human rights issue. So as long as you are supporting us, we will support you, that sort of thing. And you see a significant tilt of the Rajapaksa regime because of this factor. So the human rights concerns and China's support on that. And now Wang Yi, you see Wang Yi statements in different parts of the world, where he calls it, look, this is a political virus, where he names as well as he used very aggressive terms. So you see a wolf warrior style diplomacy coming in, and it is happening even in Sri Lanka. You can see from the Twitter handle of the Colombo embassy, they're very direct, they're very blunt in their statement. So you see a shift during the pre-pandemic to the post-pandemic era. So you see a shift in their aggressiveness of their diplomatic policy. So the Chinese visits, not only the high-level visits of individuals, also visits of the recent visit of the the vessel which was carrying the uranium hexafluoride, one of the toxic materials. So the vessel came to Hambantota port, which is in the deep south, so the Chinese port. But the Navy was not allowed to get into the ship also, and because I mean, there was a dispute in there. So, but then the ship was turned back again. Now, this was not the first time that we turned back. I mean, there was a submarine visit when Prime Minister Modi was in Sri Lanka, and so again, the Sri Lankan government would have to say that we are not allowing this to happen when the Prime Minister of India is in Sri Lanka. And the last time then there was a submarine visit in 2014. So you see China's pattern of some sort of presence coming in from the maritime sphere and into the Sri Lankan ports. They're not sort of all these infrastructure in these slides are developed by China. So the China is the largest investor. The loans that are taken, a significant amount is from China. The largest trading partner is also China, mainly on imports. So what you see at the bottom is the Colombo port city. Now, this is what has been discussed right now, where the geographical area has been altered and where sea has been reclaimed, and where China has built this artificial sort of a land where they want to build a city. Now, when you look at this, I compare it with the 99-year lease and the present bill, which has been challenged right now at the Supreme Court by many. There were 20 petitioners who went, say that, look, what China is asking is the extra jurisdictional right here, because it bypasses the country's laws, it bypasses the customs, it bypasses many other things, so the Auditor General and various others. So, yeah. So I see a similarity between 99-year lease as well as to Hambantota, as well as the port city, which happened. It's got the bill which has happened right now, and I compare it to. This is in Djibouti. Chinese base was set up a few months after they inaugurated the economic zone. The economic zone is about 10 kilometers away from the military base. You can see in the map. So the Djibouti International Free Trade Zone, where the largest amount of money has been pumped from China, and where there are two economic zones built in Djibouti. One is called the Touch Roads, the other one is the Djibouti International Free Trade Zone. And here the pattern is quite similar. I see a pattern, which is, I mean, geopolitically, we analyze it. Djibouti being, at the Horn of Africa, one of the key areas, geopolitically significant key, points where you can have a significant influence in the East African coast. So what you see is like the economic zone. Then 2 months after that in Djibouti, they started the military base for $20 million. So here is an article which I wrote a few days ago, and it's been published at the ORF, so you can read about it, where I bring 20 special economic zones and try to understand, okay, how much have these economic zones given to given back to the economy, how much of contributions has been given to the host country. And is China trying to create their own markets with their dual circulation? The new economic policy. Are they trying to create new markets that would flood Chinese imports? So here's a study basically on 20 cases, and you don't see much benefits that the host countries have gained from these economic zones. So what they're asking in Sri Lanka is this. And they would call it's an international project, not a Chinese project. And China is actually doing this. I mean, a few years ago, we didn't see the port city. They are reclaiming, this is in South China Sea, they are reclaiming and they are changing the geography. And what you see is on the special economic zones, where I tried to sort of, when I did the analysis in Djibouti, and there was this gentleman called Lin Yufu, who introduced it to two presidents, one in Djibouti as well as another president. So you can see it's a sort of Lin explains it saying it's like a phoenix nest where you build a nest and wait for the investments to come. And basically, so that's the concept that China is taking forward. Here, what I see is one in the marine sphere and on the geosphere. Djibouti, Colombo, and Guada. There's going to be three very interesting, basically, and a significant points of maritime influence created in this particular triangle. Basically right now it's been created, and so I think it would significantly influence the maritime security of the Indian Ocean. So in the geosphere, what you have is basically the CPEC as well as the Myanmar Economic Corridor and Colombo. So in Sri Lanka, the port city. So what you have is again three corridors created surrounding India. So there is a serious pattern, a security concern here that should be concerned about. Because most of these projects are looked at economic. You look at the government's narrative right now. They're looking at from the economic perspective, but nothing from a strategic perspective or from a geopolitical perspective. So that's really important to look at. Sri Lanka has faced enormous amount of threats. I mean, look at 3 decades of war. You had the largest Easter Sunday attack. The terror attack, the largest attack in the Sri Lankan history. On the Easter Sunday day. So we have extremist terrorist threat in here. So these are some of the areas that I captured on national security, how geopolitics affects the national security also of the country. And these are some of the points in my Conundrum of an Island, where early warnings from India went unheard, as well as many of the serious issues on terrorism. And I find a connection between elections in South Asia, especially bombs and elections. So a few weeks after the bombs, there's elections. Even look at Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto. If you look at Balakot, if you look at in Sri Lanka, there are several cases like Gamini Dissanayaka's bomb, Chandrika Bandaranayaka's bomb. So they're 2 weeks or 1 week apart. Then it affects the elections significantly. It changes the entire. But there is, I looked at other parts of the regions of the world. You don't see that, and this is quite unique, and to South Asia. And so it's also important to look at, when you talk about geopolitics, it's also important to look at what's going on undersea. So here's again a reference on my Conundrum of an Island to ANU Press. Thanks to ANU Press, I got this diagram where a fishhook submarine cable is sort of being laid right now. And that's to detect the underwater, submarine operations, what's going on, the PLA operations. So you see, even in the Pacific Ocean, where it's sort of now the Indo-Pacific, is also facing this. You see a submarine cable which Chile wanted to do with China, and where Japan basically intervened and managed to get it through Australia. So another route was looked at. So you see this geopolitical competition not only in what's visible, but also undersea. So that's important to look at. So basically from the Conundrum of an Island, my recent book, where I discuss on the Chinese presence on the littorals, Indian Ocean littorals, such as in Sri Lanka, are significant. It's growing. The debt trap it's been discussed so many times about Sri Lanka debt trap. We say that no, we're not in a debt trap, but we try to justify. Some of the scholars in Sri Lanka say that, look, the volume is not so much, so why worry about it? Because the private loans are much more, commercial bonds are much more. So my argument is that, look, it's not about the volume, it's about the opaqueness, the conditionality, the transparency. That's where the problem is. So where Sri Lanka is drifting away from a rules-based, because you see Sri Lanka part of both the BRI and Indo-Pacific, but then you see, because of the significant Chinese influence coming into the island, we're moving away from the rules-based order, which is quite dangerous for a nation like Sri Lanka. And you see also the changing contours of the Sri Lankan foreign policy from non-aligned. We're having a non-aligned foreign policy, and then from Mahinda Rajapaksa's era, but moving towards a balance. We use the word balance, then we also use the word equidistance. But equidistance we cannot use because India is the closest distance power we have. But we use the term balance also, the government used the term balance. But unfortunately, right now, I see more of a bandwagoning foreign policy with China. Why I say that is because if you look at this picture, the entire terminal, the East Container Terminal, which was to be given to India, the entire port operation was stopped. And then it was heavily politicized, saying that there is a significant threat to the sovereignty of the country by giving the operations to an Indian operator, the East Container Terminal. And this was heavily politicized because even the trade unions start speaking about geopolitics. Then another case is the MCC, the grant, the US grant, which was again heavily politicized. 480 million we lost because of this heavy politicization, saying that there's a significant national security threat and a threat to sovereignty. But these threats are not seen on the Chinese projects, like the Colombo Port City bill, which is getting approved right now. So there is no threat coming in from Chinese projects, but there are threats and to the sovereignty coming from the other projects. Now the dragon, I clearly said in my book, saying that the dragon cannot be investigated. The previous government, which came to power, saying, okay, we are going to investigate the Chinese projects, we are going to tell you what are the corruptions behind it and all that, did not come with anything. They basically, this is the former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. So he basically backtracks the Colombo Port City back again, and he says that it was stopped for several months and then it restarted it. This is the present on the left is the present chairman of the Colombo Port, General Daya Ratnayaka. So where he says that certain clauses of the Hambantota Port deal, the 99-year deal, is unclear. But he says it on media, but nobody's going to do anything about it. So while you question the US, for example, the grant of MCC, the US military agreement on SOFA or AXA, or the East Container Terminal, or the Japanese LRT, the train project, there is questions on of significant threats coming in, but there's no threats coming from China. So what basically, clearly, it's a clear China bandwagoning policy right now. And why? Because of the significant amount of loans that we've taken, even from Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime right now, on currency swaps as well as many other loans. Human rights position, where China is supporting Sri Lanka, and acceptance of a Rajapaksa's ultra-nationalist ideology. Now, here is another danger that I bring in, because the CCP, the recent Communist Party, as well as the Rajapaksa political party, the SLPP, the joint seminar, where they accepted the CCP development model, and where minister Basil Rajapaksa, who's the brother of political we call him the brainchild behind Rajapaksa, say that this is the model that we should follow. The same being discussed. I mean, you see a same sort of a quote coming from the defense minister's visit, where he says that Communist Party of China and its poverty alleviation model is one of the best models that Sri Lanka should adopt. And this particular same line, I saw it on a phone conversation, which was published, the phone conversation between President Xi and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa after Human Rights Council vote where China voted. So saying, thanking each other for supporting the human rights, and also saying that Chinese development model should be, we should adapt that model to Sri Lanka. So here I see where China is coming in to the political sphere. And that's why the danger is they're already in the economic sphere, but they will move into also to the political sphere. There will be a significant reduction in the democratic model. Now, will the new model be accepted? Because Sri Lanka, if you look at it with 28 military appointments, so it has a bit of militaristic footing right now. So would that model be, it would be, my argument is that it would be different, but it will be different to Myanmar or Pakistan. But would it be accepted is something that we'd have to see. So it's important that you recalibrate Sri Lankan foreign policy, the China tilt to balance policy, and understanding the strategic dimension. It's really, really important, not only in the economic gains, but also the long-term strategic dimension. Commitment to the rules-based order, the Indo-Pacific, is a must, and Sri Lanka has invested heavily on the law of the sea and many of back in the past. So Sri Lanka should do that. Indo-Lanka relationship is key, and strengthening this relationship with Delhi is really, really important. Losing the balance in its foreign policy will invite significant security threat for a nation like Sri Lanka, and also instability. Thank you.
Thank you, Asanga. It's an extremely well-rounded presentation, as we saw, bringing in various elements that make Sri Lanka such an attractive destination for almost all major powers, whether it is United States, Russia, including countries like Israel, now increasingly China, and of course India, being the next door neighbor, has constantly tried to engage with Sri Lanka. And then the way Asanga has outlined both internal dynamics and how Sri Lanka engages and influences the larger regional dynamics, perhaps gives us an idea. And it's interesting that we have today participants all the way from South Africa to Philippines, and we have some young students from India's northeast. We have participants from Mumbai. So in that sense, if you look at the expanse within which Sri Lanka is located, it's interesting that he used so many maps, and I'm sure each one of us were looking at those maps from where we are seated, from where we are located ourselves. And in that sense, each of them are developing a certain perspective on where is Sri Lanka located at the very center of enormous geopolitical connectivity, which is developing over a period of time. I should make a logistics statement at this time, logistics. Those who wish to either ask a question or make a comment, I saw a couple of compliments in the text. Let me say that the best method, easiest method is to switch on your videos and raise your electronic hand. And those of you who are familiar with Zoom meetings by now should be knowing how to raise your electronic hand. So that makes it very easy for me to look at my screen with your picture there and your electronic hand up there. So that will be the easy way of asking for the floor. And then, of course, if you have any difficulty in raising electronic hand, you could always raise your physical hand, except that I may miss it once or twice. So if I miss it, please don't mind. I will still try to look at the fact that you were raising hand like this. I have noticed one hand is already up, but I would urge that try that method of raising e-hand. Like you can see, Vikyat Date has raised electronic hand right now. So those of you who wish to make a comment or ask a question, I would encourage you to raise electronic hand like this. Second, please also introduce in just half a minute or few seconds, introduce yourself so that the speaker has an idea from where that question is coming, and then he can answer that question. So let me begin by first asking Vikyat Date to make his intervention, and then we'll move to other participants. Vikyat, floor is yours.
So first of all, good evening, Asanga sir. Myself Vikyat. I'm from Mumbai and I've just completed my master's in political science. So, sir, first of all, I just want to say that I have read your book, Sri Lanka at Crossroads, and that really excited me to learn more about Sri Lanka's foreign policy. So, sir, my question was, recently there was allegation against Sri Lanka for doing genocide of many Tamilian civilians during the civil war. And so Sri Lanka was expecting that in the United Nations, India will vote in favor of Sri Lanka. And so India has abstained that decision, and the countries like China and Pakistan have voted in favor of Sri Lanka. So do you think that this India's decision will affect India-Sri Lanka relations to some extent, and will with this decision Sri Lanka will go a little bit in China's orbit? And I just wanted to ask that how Sri Lanka looked at India's decision of abstaining.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Asanga can answer that.
Thank you. It's a very important question that you raised, the human rights issue, because after ending the war in 2009, on multiple occasions, Sri Lanka, I mean, we have been called basically to get into a genuine reconciliation process, which we have failed, unfortunately, due to subsequent governments giving a lot of promises, but we have failed. So the new resolution which came at the UNHRC was about not addressing the grievances of the minority issues, the Tamilian concerns. Sri Lanka, withdrew from its own co-sponsored resolution in 2015. As you know, so we withdrew our own resolution. Then again, when we co-sponsored in 2015, we withdrew in 2019. So we withdrew our own resolution, and then the Human Rights Council was saying there was no progress at all. So it's about the progress, and so the ambassador was recommending some very important recommendations that Sri Lanka should take some progressive steps. And India, the vote basically was correct, because India stood for the democratic values, the human rights issues, the concerns, and abstaining was the only choice that India could do. I mean, who can't vote against Sri Lanka, but to abstain at a moment like this, because the Rajapaksa, of course, the regime wanted support from many countries, and was canvassing as well as requesting support. But India, with his the Tamilian the concern of the South, as well as, so it cannot vote for Sri Lanka. So it was a correct choice. But China what China did was basically taking the advantage of that situation. So voted for Sri Lanka, and then used the multiple diplomatic channels, visiting Sri Lanka, as well as pledging their support to Rajapaksas, and strengthening, so that it had a sort of inroad built from the human rights dimension. But what the government tried to do is quickly weaponize the decision, saying that, look, this is a Western conspiracy against the Sri Lankan regime, and the West is trying to raise all these human rights concerns. So basically why it weaponized was to cater to its political base. the nationalist political base. So important observation, Vikas. So it is it's Sri Lanka, China would use is whatever it's that's why it's clearly mentioned. I bought that I highlighted that quote on my presentation, saying that, look, you all don't talk about Hong Kong and all that, we appreciate it, so we are okay with your human rights issues, so it's sort of a direct comment by the defense minister. And so but Sri Lanka should get into a more progressive position, addressing the issues rather than being in this position.
Thank you, sir.
We still have about 82 people with us, and I would encourage people to switch on their videos so that we can see who are the participants. Let me request Dr. Balwinder Kumar to make the next intervention. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. First of all, I give congratulations for a very informative and nice presentation. I am Dr. Balwinder Kumar from Hoshiarpur, Punjab. I have a question. Sir, please tell that what implications of China-Sri Lanka relations, and with special reference to geopolitics in South Asia. If we talk about India, is there any security dilemma or a national security threat to India with the presence of China so near to India? So how you relate it with the national security of India? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If you look at the maps, the two maps, the maritime, the sphere which I drew, connecting Sri Lanka, Djibouti, and Guyana. The other one is on the CPEC, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar Economic Corridor. So you see a significant security threat coming in from these projects. I mean, how they moved in, how the economic development, how the mixed model of China, the hybrid model is still to be understood. I mean, if you look at the case of Djibouti, they went in for economic zone. Then 2 months after, they want to build up a military base. And why the reason they built in Djibouti was saying it's their obligation to sustain security in the African coast. So they could use the similar tone even in Sri Lanka if it keeps drifting like this. So there is a significant security threat by this bandwagoning policy right now with China. So I see there's a shift from the balanced posture, the foreign policy, moving towards China. So I think it's really, really important that India-Lanka relations should be much more strengthened in basically on strategic relations as well as many other parts. And Sri Lanka should understand the depth of what they are getting into. It's not only about economic benefits. Now, the port city is about 25 years from now. So it's long term. I mean, Hambantota was 99 years. So these are long-term strategic projects where Professor Swaran Singh, if I remember him speaking in Sri Lanka, he clearly says if ships don't come, much ships don't come, if the economic model doesn't work, then there is a strategic dimension. There should be a strategic dimension. So definitely that's something that India should be concerned.
Okay, thank you. We have also Professor Ramesh Kumar Madan. Yes, please unmute yourself and.
Okay, thank you, sir, very much. Dr. Ramesh Kumar Madan, Ambala, Kent, Haryana, Head of the Department of Political Science. Thank you very much for insightful and informative presentation. My humble submission is under the prevailing situations of geopolitical factors that how we can revive and strengthen the Indo-Sri Lankan relationship. Thank you so much.
Very important question. It's about the entire focus should be about strengthening the Indo-Lanka relationship right now, because when you're losing the democratic values, when you're losing the balance, when you see these factors, only you need to invest. and not to sort of let it sort of get into different heights and see many other issues like in the past regimes that we face. So it's important that you see this where China is making definite inroads to Sri Lanka, but then Sri Lankan government should also understand to basically strengthen the democratic values of the country. Sri Lanka is going through a very tough time. Its economy is really bad. It's the state of the economy. So the advantage that any extra regional country can take in a country like Sri Lanka, there is a huge window of opportunity of for nations to come and take the economic advantage, but making the case the economic investments or loans, there is another dimension, the strategic dimension, which I spoke about in my presentation. So Indo-Lanka relationship can be strengthened from minilaterals, such as what we had on the security arrangement with Maldives, Sri Lanka, and India. That's a huge success. Again, we could have many more, security-related agreements, as well as on making investing on a regional security architecture. That is really, really important that the countries in the region too, and India could lead that. So Sri Lanka is definitely a place where India should invest, but there is always a case that there is limits that India could do, because if the local polity or the trade union starts saying that, look, there is a threat to sovereignty, if the government is trying to politicize, then there is a limit that New Delhi could also do. And so this is where the danger is, as well as as an analyst, my fear is that so losing that balance would drift the Indian relationship.
Thank you. Next will be Dr. Chandrabhushan Nagar, and then Snigdha from Ahmedabad. She will make me request, but perhaps getting disconnected. So if Snigdha, you're listening to me, keep your video on. Let me first request Dr. Chandrabhushan Nagar. Please unmute yourself and make your
video. Sir, good evening. Professor Asanga, it's very good presentation and very insightful presentation. Sir, I have one small information to share and a related question to ask. The information is like I have so many Sri Lankan cadets, those who come for military training in our National Defense Academy, and some of them have become officers in the armed forces of Sri Lanka also. But surprisingly, whenever we discuss something related to China in the class while teaching the strategic studies paper, they often prefer not to comment. I would not blame anything towards them, that they may have their own implication. But I have a small question in my mind. See, India and Sri Lanka are also regularly conducting joint military exercises. Okay, and you know that India has strongly opposed the expansionist project of China, and India is the only country in South Asia who is standing opposed to that. So, how do you think that in Sri Lanka's growing closeness with China somehow would affect India Sri Lanka joint defense relations? And recently we have concluded the military exercise also in the state of Maharashtra. So, do you think that if your concern in terms of the trade or say geopolitical equations would get strengthened and equated, that these are the long-term projects, you're referring to the Djibouti and you're referring to the Haban Tota also, but we also have a lot of expectations from Sri Lanka. So how do you see a balance between the defense relations between India and Sri Lanka and the growing closeness between Sri Lanka and China, sir? Thank you.
I think in terms of military relations, thank you for that question. Very, very important question. Military relations are very important. If you look at the 3-decade war, towards the latter part of the war, the Chinese, significant support to end the war, as well as so there is a strong relationship built with China also. So I don't know why they prefer not to speak at the classroom, but probably because of the protocol. But yes, I think the relationship, the military relationship, is also quite significant. If you look at the defense minister's visit, where President has clearly mentioned that we should strengthen the China Sino Lanka relationship on military engagement also. So it's Rajapaksas are opening the doors basically for strengthening the Chinese relationship. And what you see is that India, Sri Lanka has, from the ancient past as well as from the back from the Indo-Lanka, that time IPKF. So many sort of ups and downs in the relationship. So you have military training as well as various others. So that should be strengthened. Definitely, military exercises, joint military exercises, especially in the maritime domain, has to be strengthened. And these are very, very important areas that we should invest. The Sri Lankan, I think the Indian Ocean Conference is one of the success stories, but there should be much more investment in the maritime domain. So I think, so the Chinese presence, I think there's you see a gradual increase in the Rajapaksa regime, but you didn't see that increase in the Sirisena regime, which is the previous regime. And what you saw was more welcoming towards an Indo-Pacific. So what the people, I think the general was expecting a more balanced policy. But we're kind of drifting towards more of the BRI as well as the Chinese, military leaders, the joint delegations, and so towards that. So it's important that you invest more in the Indo-Lanka military exercises. That's really, really important.
Thank you. I invite next. I can now see Snigdha on my screen. But we also have Artyom Garin. I think he's from Greece. So I will invite him to say something, but later. I also see hand of Yang, a Chinese scholar at Oxford, has gone up. I'll come in that sequence, but let me first ask Snigdha because we might disconnect again. So Snigdha, please unmute yourself and raise your question.
Yes, good evening everyone. I'm Snigdha. I'm a second year student at Pandit Deendayal Petroleum University doing my honors in public administration and international relations. So my question is that Australia and Sri Lanka's recent experience working together to prevent the people smuggling from Sri Lanka has been one of the most significant and largely unreported wins in the security cooperation. So, sir, what role do you think has Australia to play in preventing Sri Lanka leaning towards China?
Very specific.
I think one of the recent examples I gave was a few days ago about Australian Prime Minister, how she turned down a BRI project in one of the provinces, and saying that it doesn't fit the foreign policy of Australia, that particular project. So Australian Prime Minister was, very straightforward and would come out and say that, look, this particular project doesn't fit our foreign policy. So that's something that, I really admire that, saying that, if Sri Lanka could also see not all the projects, but, certain projects that doesn't fit the Sri Lankan agenda or its economic, doesn't give any economic returns or anything. So Sri Lankan should be evaluating these things, as well as Sri Lankan should take a position. Even on the port city, I'm not against the port city. I'm against the model that has been put forward of asking extra-jurisdictional rights to a certain degree. So these are the issues that I think the Sri Lankans would need to take more of what they really want and their national interests. That's something that Sri Lanka could learn from Australia at this particular point. So even if you're looking at the 5G network or whatever, I mean, of course, you could look at Sri Lankans should be looking at it and will be confident of what we really want. And so because some of the projects, unfortunately, they haven't given us any return, such as the airport in the south, which has been continuously shut down for now many years, and there's only a few flights for a year, and we invested heavily and this particular airport, and then so the certain models, we'd have to. I think there's a lot to learn from other projects. That's why I mentioned 20 SEZs to look at before we do our SEZ. So, but there's not a single paper that I could find in Sri Lanka or in India anywhere that an analysis is done on special economic zones one by one. Whether is there any sort of a huge benefit out of this, or should we follow this model, a new PPP model? There's a lot to learn if we sort of, get into the actual, the real subjects. The problem is that we have too much of information in our domain that we are not focused on what we really, really want. And like you mentioned, the people smuggling, a very important area, transitional, security threats. Both countries have done tremendous work on that, and Australia has actually helped. I'll tell you something that actually a lot of people don't know. They did a workshop with Sri Lanka on how to prepare a national defense policy for Sri Lanka, and I was there at that time at the security think tank, and Australians did help Sri Lanka. And we now Sri Lanka has a national defense policy approved by the cabinet in 2019. So Australia does help a lot, and there's a lot we could learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of you, in case you are not able to raise electronic hand, you can also write to me in the text. So Ghazala, I have noted your request. I'll come to you soon. But before that, let me ask if Professor Sangam or if Artyom Garin wish to speak on any of these issues that we are discussing. You could let me know in the text or raise electronic hand. If that is not happening, send me the text. We also have a scholar who's Chinese scholar now at Oxford. And since China keeps coming in much of our discussions, let me now invite Yang, who's raised hand to ask a question or maybe make a comment. Yang, you can unmute yourself and make your intervention.
Thank you so much, Professor Singh, and thank you so much, Dr. I'm so glad to hear your presentation. So I have a quick question, is that as we know that India is actually like the regional leading power of South Asia and the Indian Ocean. So I just wonder about, regarding China's investment and China's engagement in Sri Lanka, that definitely raised a kind of anxiety. So, as for India's anxiety for China's influences in Sri Lanka, do you think that it is status or it is security or it is power that is the most paramount factor that raised India's anxiety regarding the Chinese existence? Thank you.
Yeah.
Let the speaker answer that question.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Yang. I think that's also a very important question. Anxiety of Chinese presence in Sri Lanka is natural because sometimes when the project is opaque, when things are not clear, it gets the anxiety levels get higher. For example, when a ship carries radioactive material and comes into the Hambantota port, so which happened a few days ago, and when the Navy, Sri Lankan Navy, is not allowed to get into that ship, so the anxiety level, obviously, with both countries gets a bit higher. Some of the personnel, security, be it security officers, or so even the submarine visits, the anxiety levels went. Basically, although it's a port call, I think that's why I have been talking about it from 2015. it's important that India, Sri Lanka, has a better understanding on, port calls, on various submarine visits. So, but unfortunately, the architecture is not still built, as well as the institutional level engagement is still not there. That's why I mentioned about the minilateral, which I was very happy when India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives signed it. So you're institutionalizing these activities. So the anxiety level gets really, it get into a certain stage, like the Port City Bill. Now, Port City Bill, which is the Port City Development Project Bill, which is asking for extra jurisdiction right to bring in investments as well as to create a separate zone in Sri Lanka. Now, that got into a height of level, the things got aggravated because it was submitted at the holiday time, because Sri Lanka had this Sinhalese Tamil New Year holiday, so it was sort of a back channel that carried that forward. So Sri Lankan, I think the way they use this model or the approval processes and has to be more transparent. You have to have a discussion. Now they're saying they would give 1 day of discussion at the parliament. So 1 day is not enough for a bill like that. Even the 99-year Hambantota port lease agreement, it was signed on a Sunday in a closed room, and so there's not much of discussion. There was no, so it's important that China look at their model. Even on the projects, they need to sort of reevaluate. One of the talks I gave to Chinese university recently, I said, why don't you look at the model that you introduce into certain countries and set some standards much better. So you don't need to have the others, basically like the blue dot, standards of infrastructure. So you don't need to do that. So it's better that you have clear, what you are doing with the money. People know about it. There's a lot of engagement. So the anxiety level gets really high when certain projects are not clear. And would those, there's a question, because if there's a port built and there's not much of ships coming, or if there's an airport built and there's no flights coming, the anxiety levels go high, because obviously that could be turned into a military operation. This has happened that's why I mentioned about Djibouti. So there is a case in different parts of the world where China exercises. So getting into a standard, having openness is really, really important.
Thank you. I see in the list that I have is we have people with us. We will have 1 second. Sometimes my screen gets obstruction. So we have Artyom Garin, followed by Sotaro Nagao, then Ghazala, and if there is nobody else, we'll give second chance to Nishat to come again. So let's begin. We still have about 73 people with us. So I want to keep encouraging people to switch on your videos so that we know that we are all together discussing this subject. If you are in the same room here where your laptop is right now, you are able to listen to me. I suggest you switch on your video and we all feel we are here so that we are discussing the subject. And so treat it as more as an interactive session rather than Radio Ceylon. I was a young boy when we used to listen to Radio Ceylon. Today we have a speaker from Ceylon. So let's begin with Artyom Garin. Please go ahead and make your introduction.
Continuing to the topic of Australia, dear speaker, dear participants, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to ask the question. As we know, the debt trap discourse is also common in the South Pacific. And what do you think is there common features in this issue between the island states of Indian Ocean or the island states of Pacific Ocean, and how can Quad states respond to this? Thank you.
Asanga, you're muted.
Yeah. I think the debt trap has been discussed in many occasions. Debt trap, like I said, it's not the volume of the debt. So obviously the volumes they're saying is much less than the commercial borrowings or the sovereign bonds. But I disagree with the scholars that say that, look, it's not about the volume, although the volume is smaller than the commercial bonds or the sovereign bonds, but the opaqueness and our commitments, as well as the transparency of these loans, the conditionality of these loans. So that's a significant issue that we have, and we need to address. So we keep borrowing. Sri Lanka now recently also did a currency swap, then another loan. So we keep borrowing. The general public doesn't know what we are borrowing for. That's another issue that we have. So what do we borrow? What is it for? What particular project? What are we working on? So, and what are the interest rates that have been? So how does the Quad or the others? I think by setting some standards, it's very important for nations like Sri Lanka, because right now, when I studied the Djibouti case, I saw a significant amount of loans again being taken. But then again, I think at some particular point that nations, don't have that sort of muscle to ward off certain pressures from security or various others. A Japanese scholar sometime back used to tell me, like, what if you keep on borrowing like this, and then you become and you don't have the muscle or the strength to ward off any pressure from such a country, or like China. So it is an important observation for nations like Sri Lanka with a smaller GDP, and so it could get trapped. That's what the whole the argument is, and of course, I think we could get into that sort of level of so Quad can definitely assist, but Sri Lanka is moving away from the rules based. The Indo-Pacific. That's why I say that we are shifting more towards the BRI, but then we should have the values that we had, like what we sort of invested in back in the past, like the law of the sea. I did tremendous work in the law of the sea back in the past. So we should do much more in those particular areas. So I think Quad can help, of course.
Thank you. Let me go to a friend from Japan, Dr. Satoru Nagao. Please unmute yourself and make your introduction.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, your presentation is always good, my friend, Asanga. I'm glad to learn from you today, and I learned a lot. My question is related with the US-China competition. Sri Lanka is middle of the US-China competition, I think. And does Sri Lanka concern the US policy toward China? And I think US will win. So in this case, what will the Sri Lanka do? That is my question. Thank you.
Having Satoru is very dangerous. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nagao. Yes, there is a significant competition between US and China. And as you know, what we saw in Anchorage, it was a clear example in Alaska, where the Biden team got a lecture from the Chinese, senior ambassador Yang Jiechi, as well as the foreign minister. Both of them have visited Sri Lanka, Yang Jiechi, as well as the foreign minister once, but again, he's coming back again in 2 weeks or something to Sri Lanka. The message that they give to Sri Lanka is same. It's the same that I see what is happening in the global arena is happening in Sri Lanka. And what they're trying to say is that, look, be with us, and, then them. It's a binary choice that they are putting forward. So, but the problem is the countries like Sri Lanka, we can't be in the binary. So that's why I specifically say, let's be with the middle powers like Japan, Australia, India. Be with the middle powers and work with the middle powers. But how do you sort of manage this? When the elephants fight, obviously, the little creatures get, sometimes, so they get into trouble. So like Sri Lanka. So I think it's really important that Sri Lanka sticks to not lose its democratic values, its rules-based order, its commitment, and that's really important. And what the danger here that I see is the CCP all of a sudden has, I don't know, I see a sudden spike in the CCP activity, the Communist Party, maybe because of the centenary, that the CCP centenary is this year. So with the political party levels, so this is something I haven't seen before. And I think the US, Sri Lanka lost the US, MCC grant so far, as well as status of force agreement, AXA, so many of it. So so it's important that Sri Lanka should rebuild its that relationship. But I don't see any patterns of going that way, because you see more of China, and the Chinese presence. So I don't try to, not that the US, the development activities and all are there in the country, but I don't see that aggressiveness or the posture that China has taken in different areas, be it think tanks. Now, for example, CRF, China Reform Foundation, has given funds. So, example, CRF has done tie-ups with think tanks. So, so at university level, at different levels. So it's sort of a multi-pronged approach from China than the US. So yeah, it's. Did I answer your question, or it's just?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's proper answer, because US is not shows a strong presence in Sri Lanka economically. That's true, but militarily they will come, and the policy towards China is very strong. So this policy do not directly related to Sri Lanka, but indirectly it will come.
Okay, both of you, let me now invite Professor Anil Rai Sangam. Would you like to say something at this stage? If you can hear me, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of difficulty listening to the conversation, but first of all, I just want to thank Professor Asanga for this very informative discussion. I'm geographically, I'm very far away from Sri Lanka and India, but what I see from my perspective is that Sri Lanka, with a population of about 22 million people, has certain insecurities. Primarily the insecurity is economic. Secondly, there is a degree of political instability in Sri Lanka to an extent. And then we look at diplomatic efforts between Sri Lanka and their neighbors. Now, if you look at China, the efforts of China has invested heavily economically into Sri Lanka, number one. Number two, there is a high level of political cooperation between Sri Lanka and China. And thirdly, if you look at the diplomatic efforts, China is actually they are cooperating with Sri Lanka diplomatically. So we see a gap here. What is the gap? The gap is there any military cooperation between the two countries? Yes, there is. So, which is what Professor Asanga has been telling us. As an outsider from another region, what I see here is that India is competing for influence in Sri Lanka. My impression is that India is not doing enough. It is not contributing enough. Perhaps Professor Asanga can inform me about what's actually happening. Is India's efforts economically, politically, diplomatically deficient when compared to China? That is my question. I'm sorry it's a bit long-winded, but I hope you got the gist of what I'm trying to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Anurag. I think, yes, it's a very important observation, as well as, can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So, I think, yes, I think to a degree it is deficient, India's engagement. Now, but you cannot blame India also of its deficiency. It is a deficiency in Sri Lanka also, because the deficiency is to accept the Indian, basically the model or the Indian way. I mean, we look at, okay, one particular point is that on the human rights issues, okay, so I mean, it goes back to the devolution of power of Sri Lanka, and it goes to 1988. Now, the devolution was signed, to give minority, basically the members of our society and powers. So, but still, we haven't done the devolution of power. Now, back in Mahinda Rajapaksa, when he was president, he said, "Okay, I'll give you a devolution plus." So that was a promise that he made to the Indian government at that time. But no one knows what that plus is. But nobody know, and the minority community is always. I mean, we have not addressed those issues. So the problem is that the political instability comes with minority concerns, with human rights concerns, various other concerns, where the nations who value these concerns like human rights, democracy, and all that, looks at Sri Lanka, saying that, look, what is happening to this country is really, really wrong. And so this observation is a deficiency that is coming from Sri Lanka. While there is a deficiency between the two countries on bilateral, relationship of building that, the political or economic wise, yes, there is a bilateral, very strong. We do have good relationship economic wise, but still there is much more that Sri Lanka should do. But it has a very protective inward policies, protecting on thinking of because of the majoritarian, the nationalist view. Certain FTAs are looked at, okay, we will lose our market to, become another Indian sort of sub-state or that sort of thing. And these have been discussed right throughout our history. So you see that sort of a insular protectionist, be it the FTA, even with Singapore. We can't have an full active FTA. So these are issues that Sri Lanka has. There are deficiencies that Sri Lanka has. So I think both countries has these issues, but Sri Lanka would have to invest much more in the right track, because what we have promised we should deliver, be it the minority concern, be it the political democratic values. I mean, the constitutional amendment, which took place several months ago, last year, was, it's called the 20th Amendment, and where moved power from the legislature to the executive, making a strong executive. But the mandate of what the people were discussing, look, there should be more, we should curtail the power from the executive and sort of, taking back to the legislature. So there is always sort of going back and forth. And this is where the instability, comes to the country. And even if you speak on the last visit of Minister Jayashankar, he was speaking about the devolution of power. So, but devolution is a no-go. When I spoke to a senior scholar in Sri Lanka who's been working on devolution, he said, don't even speak about devolution with this present, because they believe in a more central government which has, central authority. And how do you execute devolution in a very ultra nationalist government? So these are areas that deficiencies that we have invited and we've built, and where I highlight this in my new book, The Conundrum of an Island, where I say that the foundations that we build, is not so strong. Where the scaffolds, the scaffolding, I refer to an Irish poet, Seamus Heaney, said that we cannot let go of the scaffoldings because the building will fall. It's very weak, the structures. So I think the institution, strengthening the institutional level, is really, really important for both countries, so that the deficiencies would, be minimized as well as we could overcome these issues.
Okay, thank you. Unless I have missed any requests, I have now 3 last questions. Dr. Ghazala Faridi, Dr. Silpi Kaur, and again with Vikhya Dato. Let's begin with Dr. Ghazala Faridi.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you to sir for the presentation. In fact, my name is Ghazala Faridi and I teach political science in an undergraduate college in Bengal. In fact, my questions are already answered partly in response to Dr. Saturo's questions. But nonetheless, I'll still ask the 2 questions. So you did mention that Sri Lanka is bandwagoning with China, and that is posing a threat to Sri Lanka's not only economic structure, but now presently of late, the political structure as well. So one way you suggested was to get closer with India and the US and the Quad and the Indo-Pacific. So what kind of retaliation is expected from China if Sri Lanka goes on that path, firstly? And how does Sri Lanka itself maintain a balance as of not choosing one or the other group, like that perception of a balance? Also, with regard to foreign policy making in Sri Lanka, what kind of influence does the academia have on the political decision makers, especially when you are especially when one is going against the tide with regard to the suggestions being made? Thank you.
Yes, Asanga.
Thank you so much. I think the entire presentation you understood so well. Thank you for that. The questions. How much of influence you can make is actually quite less academics to the policymakers. We have one foreign policy think tank at the government, the Kadirgamar Institute, and we have few think tanks, not like Delhi. So, Professor Swaran Singh knows the whole think tank community here. So there's less influence that we could make, but there are times that that certain moments that politicians would take few points as well, take it up in the parliament, and so it depends on how they sort of comprehend the what we're trying to sort of articulate in this position, as well as and also depends on how strong the government's posture is. So if the government's posture is so strong that we will move with if you see the human rights issue as a Western conspiracy, if that is the posture, then it's so difficult, to reverse that posture. So you say if you're accusing the entire West, saying that you're taking a very different route. The danger of this sort of taking that sort of route is what you just understood very well. Is that China would take advantage of that particular situation, and that's why I put that quote clearly that you don't talk about Hong Kong, you don't talk about these things, so we don't talk about your issues, so we are fine. So the danger is that, and you lose the balance. When you lose the balance, Sri Lanka is, we don't have a force projection, we don't have a huge military, we don't have that. So a country like Sri Lanka, when you lose balance, what happens is there will be tremendous amount of instability that you are inviting to the country. That's both of my books speak about that, and so that would happen, and if it goes on like that, and so this is Sri Lanka is given a binary choice. When Mike Pompeo was in Sri Lanka, he said, "Choose us, not them." Then when young Jerky was there a few weeks before that, he said, "Choose us, not them." So that's a binary, clear binary. So I said, okay, in one of my analyses, I said, don't pick either of them, pick the middle powers. because they choose both, but choose the middle powers also. So we cannot afford to choose one side. Every time in the history, when we have chosen one side, we have invited instability into the country. So that's why the balancing is the way forward. When you balance, how would China feel? Now that's a very important question, because it depends on how much we have committed. I mean, there are many official, unofficial commitments. We don't know most of what the commitments are. If the commitments of the government are much more stronger, then you won't be able to balance it. Why the bill, Colombo Port bill right now, is a question for the entire academic community, as well as why are you doing it now? Now, this happened after the phone conversation with President Xi. The phone conversation was soon after the Human Rights Council decision, so end of March it was. And so during that conversation, they did speak about the port city. But why right now? Why are you hurrying a bill? So without much discussion, without much, so you're creating this is the first time that Sri Lanka will be creating a special zone with special jurisdictional rights, where Sri Lanka, there will be a commission who will be running the zone. So it will not be the country. So when you read for example, the Auditor General does not have any authority to get into the zone. He's out of it. The Parliament is out. The Parliament subcommittee can question what's happening in the zone. So zone is something that you can go and so someone needs to sort of do much more analysis, assessment, how much of this zone can bring into the country, and also the is there any long-term security threats? Those has to be assessed. So it's not about satisfying. It's about thinking of your own national interest as a nation. It doesn't matter that you upset. Obviously you balance it. So you'd have to sometimes upset if you are bandwagoning. So you're coming back to another state, but you are thinking of your national interest. That's important. Thank you.
Asanga, we are about 20 minutes beyond the session time, and we still have questions. Can we take more questions? You have time?
Yes, no problem.
Thank you. So we have, I think I saw Manju Chaudhary has raised her hand. Meanwhile, another person, Akanksha Tiwari, had raised hand, and it's not on now. We can take the question in case you wish to speak. I will now go to Silky, and then of course, Vikhyat, you will get the second chance in the end. You were the first, and I'll make you the last. So
yeah, no problem, sir.
Good, thank you. So let's begin with Dr. Silky Kaur, and then I'll go to Akanksha, and then to Manju. Yes, please, Silky Kaur. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for your very informative talk. And sir, Sri Lanka is a close neighbor of India, and as India has reinvigorated its Indian Ocean Rim Association and is now moving towards Indo-Pacific Ocean initiatives, in which any two or more nations can start collaborating in a particular maritime sector, as it is a free and open platform. And important point to be noted is that instead of trying to set up a new architecture, it works with the architecture that already exists. And also Australia and Japan has already begun the bilateral cooperation, and Australia-India Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative partnership has already been established, which will help in shaping maritime cooperation to support rules-based maritime order, which is an important need of time, as you also said in your presentation. So, in this context, sir, how do you assess this Indian initiative of Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, which is very recent, and especially its future success? And how do you think Sri Lanka can play any role in this Indo-Pacific Ocean initiatives? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. A very important question. Sri Lanka definitely should be part of this Indo-Pacific I mean, it's really important. I mean, we are part of the Indian Ocean Rim Organization, higher up, but Sri Lanka as a maritime nation should definitely be part of the organization of the Indo-Pacific. So, because that's why I mentioned where we should follow the rules-based order. We should follow the I mean, as a nation, it has invested much more. But the problem is Sri Lanka does not speak much on what we spoke in the past, back in the 70s, 80s. You know, the rule of the law, as well as law of the sea, as well as all these what Ambassador Shirley Amarasekera spoke. You know, we don't speak. One of the reasons is that we don't point the finger. We don't. We have a more of a very passive foreign policy right now. So unfortunately, back then we used to even speak about nations who are who going against the international law as well as the law of the sea. We speak about it with the group of allies such as India, and so it's very important that Sri Lanka being part of that this particular Indo-Pacific organization, as well as I mean, Sri Lanka's can easily fit that model, because being a democratic nation as well as having all those essence, it fits very well with it. And because even if you look at the maritime domain, we have many areas that we could strengthen, be it counterterrorism activities, be it the piracy issues that Sri Lanka has. Sri Lanka has serious issues with the drug trafficking. They use Sri Lanka as a hub for transshipments and many other issues. So here is a way to strengthen that relationship, and also with the European Union, EU, where Sri Lanka, like projects like Camario, which is happening in the Western Indian Ocean. I mean, I spoke about this in Paris at the Foreign Ministry once, that it's very, very important that Camario should be, come into the eastern side of the Indian Ocean, and Sri Lanka should be a partner of the project Camario, where you monitor, as well as on strengthening coast guards, as well as developing those softwares and bringing into the country. It's really, really important that you do that. And so I think that these are the opportunities that the country Sri Lanka has been well positioned in the Indian Ocean, and can explore with India, as well as its its allies like Maldives and Mauritius and various other littoral countries. And littoral countries are really, really important in today's context. So if you look at Raja Mohan's work on Samudra Manthan, he clearly identify some of the reasons why littorals are really, really important in this equation of where Indo-Pacific and BRI when it comes. So Sri Lanka can easily fit that sort of model, and be part of it. So, but you need the commitment of the government. And
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Kanksha, you wish to say something at this stage? You could unmute and make it.
Me all. I'm Akanksha from Center for European Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And although I'm not an expert in this region, I would just like to thank Asanga sir for an interesting topic and discussion. And it was really not knowledge enriching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that all? Okay, let's go to Manju Chaudhary. You would like to say something?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. My question is this: that how Sri Lanka will try to maintain their non-alignment and neutral foreign policy, because we know that Sri Lanka have pressure from both sides, Quad nations and from China side. So how Sri Lanka will try to maintain their foreign policy with their own economic development? Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. Non-aligned, we are past that era. I mean, just like India, we started the non-aligned with the Nehruvian as well as back from Krishna Menon, that era where I think we passed that. Both nations have passed. So India became multi-aligned in their foreign policy. Sri Lanka became balanced and tried to be neutral. Sometimes we use the word equities, but the three terms are quite different to each other. So, but the politicians use it thinking they're all same, saying it's balance, so balance and neutral. But I think it's very, very important that we use the the neutral concept, that being sort of balancing with, but I don't see the balance anymore. So if you look at the previous regime of President Sirisena, his foreign policy, because the regime to regime foreign policy is sort of articulated in Sri Lanka. So the previous regime was saying that we would follow a balanced Asia-centric foreign policy. So the Gotabaya regime, the present regime, says that we follow a balanced foreign policy. So, Mahinda Rajapaksa, back then, he said it's a non-aligned, with values of non-aligned and non-aligned. So anyway, the non-aligned, the principles and values are still there in our foreign policy. So it's referred many times. If you look at the Sri Lanka's contributions back then, creating Pan-Asianism, and it's very important that that Sri Lanka steps forward and contributes to regional development of but we have not done much because of significant shifts in our foreign policy, like what I mentioned, the bandwagoning. One of the reasons which the minilateral, which we signed recently with India and Maldives, we signed it recently because it was delayed for several years. Reason is one of the countries in the minilaterals had a significant Chinese influence. So that's why we delayed that process for many years. So now that we, a lot of things that if you're in a balanced posture, you will be able to sign, you will be able to activate, you will be able to, play a more active role than a passive role.
Thank you. Let's have the last question now. Unless anybody else wants to say, let's go to Vikhyat Date. Please make your introduction.
Yeah, so Asanga sir, my question was that recently a Chinese ship filled with a good amount of uranium halted at Hambantota port for many hours. And after the pressure from Sri Lankan government, Chinese ship went away. So what I think that in future, if China wants to supply any weaponry to India's enemies, they can use Hambantota means as a place to halt their ship filled with weaponry. So we can say that Sri Lanka at that time would be would be dragged against India by China. So do you think, sir, that Rajapaksa government being too much pro-Chinese would hurt Sri Lanka and India relations in the coming future?
Okay, yeah, I think it's a scenario that you are asking me. You need a foresight analysis done on whether Rajapaksas would do something like that. Well, if you look at Rajapaksa's, reactions on the ship, basically to send it back, and not only Rajapaksas, if you look at Sirisena, the previous president, to turn back the submarines. So there is moments that Sri Lanka has faced pressure, because how can you even have a submarine? Chinese submarine when the Indian Prime Minister is in the country. When you're hosting the Indian Prime Minister, you cannot have So this is not possible, and so you get into certain pressure as a small nation. We do get into significant pressure. Working at the foreign ministry, at the foreign think tank, foreign policy think tank, several assessments I have done, we have got into significant pressure from nations. But India, the relationship with India has always been very rich, as well as it goes. I mean, it is something that we don't need to orchestrate, but it is already sort of we do connect very fast, as well as we have that. But we take that as an advantage, saying that, look, even one of your senior officers or political officers, as well as a think tank, he told me that, look, my prime minister can call your prime minister, and that things can be resolved. But I disagree with him. I said, look, that's not the way to solve things, because things have to be institutionalized, and we still have that mentality that we can call each other, and no, that's wrong. And so that's why I emphasize on even my work there, try to institutionalize this so that you will minimize this. So even radioactive or weaponship or whatever comes in, we don't need to worry. New Delhi and Colombo has some agreement in place, has signed documents in place, has institutionalized everything. So why do we worry? So we have taken we can take one position as as we have already committed. So here the problem is we haven't institutionalizes. Every time we try to do that, someone from either Colombo or Delhi says that, look, you can make that phone call, don't worry about it so much. No, I don't believe that. So I think it's really important that you institutionalize it.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. I think we had a very large number of questions, and Asanga is full of energy, and he's answered each one of the questions in good detail. If you found me briefly distracted, that's because we keep hearing all sad news in the middle of pandemic, and received some news of that nature that made me engage some other people meanwhile. So please follow all protocols almost sort of like a soldier. Make sure social distancing, physical distancing is maintained, that you wear double masks, which are now being advised, that you wash your hands, and just take care of yourself as much as possible. I'm sure, like me, many of you are also receiving news of theirs, friends and people in your network. Difficult situation here, but let's be very, very careful, because one is hearing very, very unusual news very often now, and social media connects us so much that we immediately start getting several news that maybe we wouldn't have received at such speed earlier. Let's be very careful, and that's what I wanted to also underline. Great talk, as all of you have said, both in your comments, questions, and also in your text boxes. Great feeling to have a very dear friend come and spend such long time. And be patient to our questions and engage all our participants. Thank you for the participants. Also, even almost 35 minutes beyond our time, we still have about 57 people with us. That's a great delight. I think that's partly also given the name of speakers that we are able to bring. So, they have their own credibility in terms of people wanting to listen to them. We will continue that exercise as long as speakers are indulgent with us and the participants are always supporting these discussions. So, almost the reason why we are doing these interactions. With that, I'll hand over now to Professor Reena Marva for the formal vote of thanks. Professor Marva.
Thank you, Professor Singh, and a very, very big thank you and our sincere gratitude to Dr. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera. Thank you so much for very candidly putting across the real conundrum of an island state like Sri Lanka. And I myself have, our book is in print right now on the economic footprint of China in South and Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka, as you could imagine, is one of the 4 countries case studies that we have taken. So certainly, as you said, that China weighs heavily on all decision making that happens in Sri Lanka, and it's going to be a really, really tough exercise to kind of balance, with other powers, and whether it's middle powers or even with India, even as much as Rajapaksa said when he came into office this time, 2.0, as you rightly coined it, that the India relationship would be very, very sacrosanct and would be given primacy. But we do know, and as you yourself said, that the crisis that is currently brewing around the Colombo City project is not an easy one, which actually impinges on the sovereignty of your country, given the fact that it is going through difficult, turbulent times in the economic sphere, given that, tourism is a major puller of the GDP of the economy, as well as remittances, and both have been badly hit by the pandemic. So the pandemic has brought about much transformation and a lot of realignments and multi-alignments, and the challenges for Sri Lanka are no less. So I really hope and pray that the Sri Lankan economy, sort of revives, and all of us in the neighborhood, we wish well for our neighbors, and Sri Lanka is a very important partner country for India, as you have very rightly mentioned. And, the fact that you have put across all your very, very candid viewpoints and brought that out in your books as well, which I have referred to in my writings. We are truly grateful to you for indulging with, so many questions. And as Professor Singh said, we've gone beyond our time, and we still have almost 60 participants with us. And of course, a big thank you to all our participants for being here today in this webinar. Again, a very important, insightful, and wonderful discussion that we had. It's your questions which really enliven the entire, webinar series that we have been organizing. And the next webinar will be again in a fortnight's time. For 19th of May, we have Dr. George Zogolopoulos, who is the director of the EU-China program, the European Institute in Nice, in France. And he would be speaking to us on European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy. So we are going to remain, a lot in the maritime domain, because a lot is happening in the maritime domain. And even the Economist, the latest Economist also talks about, what's happening to Taiwan, and how, the situation is really, really becoming a difficult one. So with these words, we want to thank our speaker for today. Asanga, thank you so much once again. We're truly delighted that you could join us and continue to be with us. And we hope we have another opportunity to engage you. Thank you to all our participants for staying on and for your wonderful questions. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. And stay safe, stay well, and blessed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reena. Thank you, Professor Soren. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and for all the questions. Thank you. To be in touch. Stay safe.
Yeah, we really need that. Please pray for us. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.